again,
it's a book,
so I know you can't put
There's
every
more
single
room.
scene, but I am always bitter that they didn't do the rain scene for John Ambrose and Lara Jean. They did like a few little flashbacks for them when they were little, but that was like one of my favorite scenes in the books.
Seeing you come alive like that, you remind me of her.
Real love is choosing each other through all of it.
I think it's really cool that you think I have golden specks in my eyes.
Sometimes you have to kiss the wrong man to know what's right.
Lara Jean, you gotta tell people how you feel when you feel it. You can't just sit up in your room writing love letters that you're never gonna send out.
Welcome to Sweetheart Saturdays, a rom-commentary podcast hosted by Mika and Becca, two heartwarmed romantics who gush about our favorite romance flicks and examine what makes rom-coms work. While the rom-com genre seemed to die out in the 2010s, To All the Boys I've Loved Before thrived because of its fresh approach to love, relationships, and coming-of-age humor.
Today we're talking about mostly the series overall, I guess. I think primarily the Netflix series.
Yes.
And how it relates to the books. We do have the full trilogy of books with us. I have the second one here.
And I have
Mika has
1 and 3.
We complete it.
Yeah.
It's a very good series. The reason I have the second is because I'm still reading it. I'm about halfway. You can see that. I'm about halfway. Pretty good.
Yeah.
You've read all of them, though.
I have several times too. It was one of the very few series I had growing up where I was like, wow, I feel seen, like not just because of the character, but also because she's Asian American. I know that I mostly focused on the final film of the trilogy,
Yes.
So Always and Forever, and so I'm gonna dive right into my notes. Here I say, let's talk Jen. Why did she get redeemed? Was it earned? Not really. Was it fun to watch? I guess. And so, if you need a refresher, Jen was Lara Jean's former best friend turned bully, and in the books, I don't believe she does get redeemed, spoiler alert. They just sort of like arrive at a point similar to the second movie where they have this understanding that, you know, we still matter to each other even though things became really, really rough towards the end. But for some reason in the third movie, they chose to go in a direction where Jen was sort of redeemed, which, you know, it was really fun to watch. Except for the fact that it wasn't really addressed what she did to Lara Jean in the first movie, which, if you don't recall, she recorded Lara Jean and Peter in the hot tub and then proceeded to post it online where it went locally viral. And I don't know about you guys, but if somebody did that to me, who was my former best friend, and didn't apologize and we were just sort of like pretending that we were cool, I don't know. I just found that particular part of the movie hard to suspend my belief of. It was weird because it was like a different Jen in the third movie.
Yeah.
Again, really fun to watch if it wasn't for the fact that she did all those horrible things at the start of the trilogy. So I didn't think it was earned. It was sweet, and I could kind of see why they would want that resolved the way that it was resolved. I just wanted, like, one tiny apology, you know? Would it have been so terrible to ask for an apology throughout
Honestly,
that entire film?
The second film would have been a good spot for it. They kind of do that weird thing in film 2 where they're, like, kind of addressing their history, and they have that talk in the treehouse. You would expect an apology from her, but she doesn't actually apologize, and Lara Jean just kind of does that thing where she accepts a preemptive apology that's never gonna come, which isn't what she deserves, and it's also not satisfying, I feel like. I think her redemption would have made more sense in the third movie if Jen had actually said, hey, I'm sorry for what I did, it wasn't okay, but she doesn't do that.
Yeah. It's even more confounding to me that, you know, they do end up going to the same school and it's still not addressed.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't even take that long to address, you know? Like, they did have, like, that brief scene and they could have just quickly went over it and that's it. Speaking to your point about like, you know, the development and the nuance in the books versus the movies, and just as a disclaimer, I really loved the movies, like really loved them.
It's a good series.
Yeah.
And we'll
Insert screenshot of my videos about Peter and Lara Jean. They are everything to me, especially in the movies, and I love Lana Condor, so, you know, it's not like us in our other show, Superhero Sundays, where I have the time of my life ripping apart Endgame. Like, this isn't that. But to that point, because I really love the books, I wish that they had developed Peter a little bit more. His character arc in the third movie was really well done. I wish there was more of him in the second movie, actually. The second movie, I feel, was the weakest of the three, because they were trying to juggle the whole, like, love triangle with John Ambrose, but for me, it didn't have enough of either of the guys for some reason. In the book, again, it's a book, so I know you can't put every single scene, but I am always bitter that they didn't do the rain scene for John Ambrose and Lara Jean. They did, like, a few little flashbacks for them when they were little, but that was like one of my favorite scenes in the books. Or one of my other favorite parts is when Peter and Lara Jean, they think that they're gonna go match for Halloween, like with their costumes, and Peter dresses up as Spider-Man and Lara Jean dresses up as, oh my gosh, who does she dress up as? I can't remember, but they're just not matching, and it's like a point of conflict, like a tiny little conflict. But it's like
that
enough.
Feels like it would belong in the second.
Yeah, and it feels like that's enough of a conflict, and it's fun too that they could put that in the movie, and they just didn't, and it made me sad because Peter's actually like such a dork, and I feel like they didn't really dive into him as much as they did until the third film, which isn't terrible. Right. The third film really went hard into his relationship with his father, but to that point I also think I didn't see enough of Owen, his younger brother, who plays a little bit more of a role in the trilogy, and then his mom. Like they had his mom at the start of the trilogy, and then they sort of like, okay, she's not
family
around.
Falls back.
Yeah, they could have involved them a little bit more, because one of my other favorite things that Peter and Lara Jean bonded over was when they would go on those early morning drives, because his mom's an antique shop owner from what I recall, and they would go on early morning drives and compete with an old man to like go to estate sales, get the best antiques. I don't know how well that would translate over to film anyways, but it would be a pretty quick
montage.
Yeah.
The second movie, I feel the pacing was a little funky.
Yes.
The conflict felt very, I guess because they didn't have those little things like the Halloween thing you mentioned, the conflict felt a little dramatic because they had to emphasize it.
Yeah.
Which meant that at the end of the second movie, when Peter does show up for her, I felt like a lot had to have happened off screen, especially for Peter, that we just don't get to see for him to come to that conclusion. And I think Peter's generally a pretty great character and a great love interest, because he tends to reflect a lot and really think of her and what she wants. And since she's the main character, first person main character, that's what you would want. If it was reversed, you'd want her to do the same for him. I feel like the love interest in rom-coms doesn't tend to reflect in the same way, isn't as introspective in the same way. Usually it's some kind of circumstance or situation or like one epiphany that brings them together. So I appreciate that for Peter, that he works on himself a lot with her, which helps her to work on herself with him too. So I appreciate that.
That actually sparked something else in me, which was in that second movie, they really didn't go into the history of John Ambrose and Peter enough for me, because like first
they were just kind of tacked on.
I feel like they should have. I mean, I'm sure that in their minds, when the first movie was made, they wanted it to exist as a standalone too, if for whatever reason the sequel wasn't picked up, if it didn't like get greenlit, if it wasn't doing well, which I understand. But like they really could have slipped in the fact that the person in Model UN that Lara Jean wrote the letter to used to be Peter's best friend. Like that's the whole
really weird
point. And then in the second movie, that was more about like the relationships between John Ambrose and Lara Jean, and then Peter and Lara Jean, but not enough Peter and John Ambrose. I felt like we could empathize with each character more because of that dynamic, especially for John Ambrose. The whole idea is that he feels like he's second string to Peter, and Peter gets everything that he wants. But on the flip side, Peter feels like John Ambrose is more intelligent, more well-rounded, and so I just feel like they should have dived into that. It felt like John Ambrose, and I love Jordan Fisher, so I loved him coming in, but I feel like he was shoved into the picture and it didn't have enough emotional depth or investment from Peter.
Most of our problems, I think, are in the second movie, but the first one, I think, is really
pretty solid,
well-rounded.
Yeah.
And the last one, it has this like heaviness to it, I guess, because you have this established plot, so it's not gonna feel light the same way the first one does. Lara Jean, who has done all this growing for two movies, is finally coming into herself and realizing what she wants separate from her relationship, which is really important for coming of age stories. And I think really important, like that would have been something I would have loved to have seen when I was a little younger.
Me too.
Especially going into college, because my experience with going into college was a disaster. So that's like something that's really great, following what you want, not giving things up for a significant other, because some people really do that. I mean, I went to college with my boyfriend at the time, and I specifically chose my college because of my friend and my boyfriend who went here, which, you know, affected the trajectory of my life for better or worse. I think in pretty good ways, but you want to choose for yourself. So I really appreciate that. In the third movie, I thought they conveyed that pretty well. The Jen plot aside, I think that Peter and Lara Jean's conflict with that was convincing.
For sure.
And relatable.
For me, I picked my university based on proximity to the people I loved as well.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to say I regret, but there have been times where I'm like, damn it, like I should have just gone to the furthest university or college that had accepted me. And I did it purely out of the fear that I'm going to lose all these people that I love. Spoiler alert, I did lose them anyways, but it was like a good loss. So it's kind of like, damn it. It's okay because it worked out.
One expects.
But it truly is a movie that explores that journey, and I wish that I had seen it when I was younger, when I was making that decision. I recently watched an ABG, so that's another podcast that, you know, if you're into listening to podcasts like ours, it's not like ours, but it's called Asian Boss Girl. And Jenny Han, the author of the books, she recently spoke with ABG, and she talked about how she actually did push for more footage and screen time with Lara Jean's Korean heritage, specifically in the third film. So when they go to Korea in the first start, in like the beginning of the film, and they did it without it feeling gimmicky. And I really appreciated it. Obviously, I'm not Korean, but it was just one of those things where, especially when she's talking to Peter about how she doesn't feel like she belongs because she can't speak the language, I was like, oof, hits home. I relate. And actually, I don't know if she tried to fight for that when she was writing the books, but I remember that it wasn't as big in the books, I think, like the trip to Korea. It was just sort of something that happened prior to the start of the book. And so the fact that they had enough time to explore that in the movie meant a lot to me. It's not even like, you know, the movie trilogy isn't even about the fact that she's Korean American, but the way that they explore it is so organic. She is Korean American, so it will come up. And I really loved how even in the second movie, when they went over to, I think, her grandmother's house, I really loved that sequence too. It's like just small little things that, you know, it doesn't feel forced. It's just part of their life.
It's just her experience,
Exactly. So I really appreciated that. I know one time in 2017, when the first movie came out, I had posted about the importance of representation and how iconic this trilogy was for me. Insert many pictures that I had my brother take of me with my 3 books. I had set up my entire room so that it could be like Lara Jean's, and it has just been like that ever since. This Trilogy's been really important for me because Lara Jean is very much like me, and I know every time I do like a Twitter get to know me meme or prompt, people are always like, you're Lara Jean, you're Lara Jean.
Yeah.
And so it was like a huge deal for me. And so I remember that I had posted about it, and somebody that was an acquaintance, they're Asian Canadian, he commented saying, you know, I don't feel like this is as triumphant because the male romantic lead is still white. Like, that's such a deep topic that I do not have the time or the expertise to dive into, but the idea of white men with Asian women has always been a point of discussion. And so I always look back on that comment and I'm like, yeah, but you know what? I recently watched my trainee talk about from Never Have I Ever, the idea that, you know, Davy's story is just one story. In the same way, Lara Jean's story is just one story. It paved the way for other stories like hers to come forth as well. And so I benefited from the trilogy and in movie form because it resonated with me. But that doesn't mean that, you know, Lara Jean, because she's Asian American, her experiences reflect every single Asian American girl's experience. But I feel like it's important to celebrate anyways.
It's a great point, and I think that as more films and stuff come out, we can see more of that exploration as well. Both are true, I think. Both are true in this case, that like that is something that we would probably want more of, as well as it still being a win that Lara Jean is this main character who is both not stripped of her identity, but can also exist pretty freely as who she is as a character.
Yeah, and like, you know, Trevor, I don't think Trevor in the books, I don't think he was white. I'm pretty sure he wasn't white. I might be mistaken, so if I'm wrong, you can correct me in the comments. I don't think he was originally white. And then Lucas, he was originally white as well. Ross Butler as Trevor surprised me, but like in a great way. To be honest, Trevor and Chris kind of stole my heart, like in the second and the third movie, and it was just so like simple, their subplot, but so humorous too. And I was just happy to see that. And obviously I want more leads to be Asian American males. But then I think about shows like the one that John Cho and Karen Gillan were on that I forget the name of, and how that didn't get picked up. Like, it didn't really get the traction that it deserved. You know, I'm not blaming my community for not showing up, but I think that now we have to be a little bit more conscious of that and show up more intentionally for when we do get Asian American males, because I think that's the only way that we can see the representation that we want, is if we show up and support the existing creators and like the existing stories. And I think it's all about how we see it too, because I could be like, well, you know, I'm not Korean, and Lara Jean's half Korean and she doesn't, because the whole idea in that subplot is that her mom passed away, and so she's not as connected to her roots. She doesn't feel that connected to her roots, and that's also something she explores throughout the trilogy. I'm full Filipino, and so I could be like, well, where's my full Filipino rom-com or whatever? But and I have been like that before, and it's really depressing. And so because I'm a writer, I'm like, well, I'm gonna write it, or I'm gonna support the stories that I do come across that feature my experiences, but I'm not gonna tear this apart because it's not me.
I hope this doesn't feel like a criticism of the person that you're talking about.
Right. I don't think,
because it's still very much a very valid criticism, like to want that Asian male lead, and especially because there's such a dialogue, I guess, to be had.
The misrepresentation, the lack of representation.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully it was still something good to take out of it. And I think that obviously I'm not Asian, but I think that Lara Jean is a pretty solid character. I can't speak to representation and how it hits or doesn't hit, but objectively, I feel like her character is really strong. She's so captivating as a first person, especially in the books. First person, like teenage girl, her inner dialogue is really, really fun to read. Yeah. And really relatable for me too. Like she second guesses herself a lot. She's honest in her inner dialogue about when she like withholds the truth. or when she like feels a bit vindictive, which I think is really refreshing. You can also see like how she's different at school versus when she's at home or with her siblings, which is like so nice. And I love that complexity of character. I think that she's a really strong character, which is why in the movies she's so captivating as this like coming of age hero, because even when she's wrong or even when she's mistaken or flawed, you want to see her through it. And the second one is one of the hardest ones for that, I feel like. You'll watch her and you'll be like, stop it.
Stop flirting with him.
Stop not telling the truth. We've kind of, I mean, we haven't touched on it in this podcast, but it has been a discussion in the rom-com fandom, if you will, that rom-coms kind of died out in the late 2000s. They started to really stop being good. There was a lack of interest in them. It's very clear that To All the Boys as a series has been pretty key in revitalizing the genre. And I would put that up with other movies like Always Be My Maybe was a good one for that on Netflix. And I know some other good ones like Set It Up is really good. We haven't had a rom-com in theaters that's really hit in a long time. And so I appreciate that the genre is still able to thrive and be revitalized through other platforms like Netflix. So I appreciate its role in that. Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Side note, Jenny has my we share a birthday. We're truly like on the same page.
Love that.
When I read the books, like whenever I go back and reread it, I'm like, it's like she's in my brain. It's like weird. Yeah, it is really great to see. I didn't realize how badly I needed that representation until I had it. Because really, like, I love rom-coms, so I'm like a big Meg Ryan rom-com fan. And I would always ascribe myself, or like to Caroline Forbes from The Vampire Diaries, like very type A hero characters that like go through their own little personal journey of being brave in their own way. I think this book came out when I was right about to graduate high school. I had just written and read out loud a love letter to somebody that I had feelings for at the time. And I was just like, I'm not the only one? What?
Very affirming.
Very affirming.
In an alarming way, because it was so accurate.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, one might say that this was a sign from the heavens, but... And the soundtrack, when the movie first came out, first movie came out, that's all I listened to. My one other wish was that they could use the song, Peter and Lara Jean song, which is Let's Stay Together by Al Green, because that song has been in my heart ever since I read it. I think the second book is where she mentions it. It might be the third. But that whole sequence too, Peter, he throws Lara Jean's perfect birthday party. At the very end, he recreates a scene from one of her favorite movies, and they end up dancing to Let's Stay Together by Al Green. I don't know, that was the one thing that I also really missed out on, I guess, in the last movie. But it was still a great time, and the song that they did pick still warmed my little heart.
But I remember you were like actively upset at the time. You were like, this isn't the right song.
It's not the right song. I have since listened to the soundtrack from that film a bunch of times, so I've grown to like it more and more. But I still stand by the fact that it isn't the right song. And so in my brain, I will constantly play Let's Stay Together. Like, I literally put that on my wedding playlist because of the books. So it was like a huge deal that they couldn't, I guess, use the song.
Hopefully this hasn't been too many spoilers, but if you haven't watched the movies, they are on Netflix. And I think that, like, first of all, this podcast, Sweetheart Saturdays in particular, is a love letter to romantic comedies. It is us wanting to gush about it and about why we love the genre so much and why movies like this and series like this that revitalize the things that we love about rom-coms are so important. That said, if you think that rom-coms are not your genre, I implore you to give them more of a chance, because there's so much to get out of romantic comedies. And if you have an idea that they're like chick flicks aren't for you, or that they would make you like look bad, or that you wouldn't enjoy it, give this one a shot, because I think that it does a lot of combining the romantic comedy elements, kind of the silliness of rom-coms, with a little bit of the coming of age and you know, with her being Asian American, that plays a role as well, and just how it's received and how she as a character has been created. It's a really fun time, and you might enjoy it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, through this podcast, if you listen to this a little more your speed than some of the other topics than we talk about, you will take these recommendations and run with it. Go enjoy it. It's a good series.
Yeah. It's really, when it comes down to it, it's about a shy girl who it feels like she's overshadowed by her big sister coming out into her own like person.
Yeah.
It's really about that and how she deals with expressing how she feels, which is a hard thing for her. And many people struggle with that. So really, it isn't about Peter or John Ambrose, although that's fun. So give it a shot.
Also, through this plot, she's low-key created a new trope, so it's pretty significant.
Yeah.
The love letter, accidental love letter thing, I think is really fresh. I'm not saying that it's like never been done, but if you were to think of like tropes that really stood out in rom-coms since like the 80s, I don't think you've really seen that particular concept. So I think that it's pretty fresh and that you would get a lot out of it. On that note,
thank you for listening to us gush about Lara Jean, Peter, John Ambrose. I mean, what more can I say but to stream To All the Boys I've Loved Before. The trilogy is over, but that doesn't mean we can't reread.
We streamed it in one night.
Exactly. So do a marathon if you want. Let us know what you think in the comments. Yes. I say pointing up.
Subscribe to our channels. You can listen to all of our episodes on our Spotify as well. So if you just want to like go for it between Superhero Sundays, Sweetheart Saturdays, and what will be eventually our Mystic Girl Mondays, which are Supernatural podcast, follow us on social media.
Yeah, tweet at us, comment on our Instagram, whatever the cool kids do.
We're friendly.
Yeah. Okay, bye. Have a great Saturday.
Yeah, have a good day. See you next time.
What is it? You do this thing, you have this whole like judgy face.